right. Hello and welcome to Plugin Along, a stream dedicated to LOTRO plugins. Last time on Plugin Along, we started by looking at a bug that plugin developer Exogenesis found. We dug into it a little bit, tried to see what the constraints of it were, what exactly it took to make it happen or not make it happen. And then we went into figuring out how to add a skill to our plugin UI. We were doing that in the Minstrel Buff plugin, and we're going to go ahead and keep working on Minstrel Buff and play around with StretchMode to make our UI size changeable, user-driven change setting. So, as always, feel free to jump into chat with your thoughts and questions. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and, let's see. All right. Yep. As Dan thought, we're going to start out here in Oskalad in Mirkwood. I'm quite fond of this height. If you're not familiar, there is actually a hidden deed for getting up to both this point, which is pretty hard, pretty tricky, and a high point over on the, on the other side, that tower over there in the distance, which is much more straightforward. But if you do both of those, you activate a hidden deed. I actually don't remember the name of it, but it's just one of those things that's in my head. Plus, you get to look down on all the elves doing all their elvish things. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and bring up, first of all, Visual Studio Code. This is a free program that you can use along with the LOTRO API extension, which wraps on top of the Lua extension to provide IntelliSense for LOTRO-specific stuff. All right, let me shrink that back down. Nope. Close that. There we go. Okay, so in-game, what are we doing? If you click on the caret menu here and go to System Plugin Manager, let me go ahead and refresh mine. I've changed my list here. We're going to go ahead and load up Minstrel Buff. Now, by default, the windows all show up in the upper left-hand corner, but Minstrel Buff windows respond to the default reposition key binding. Let's see, reposition. By default, I think, certainly for me, it is Control /, and that allows you to move most of the in-game elements, and many plugins use this method as well. So I'm going to move this to the liquid tracker over here, and also the melodic interlude window. Now, part of me thinks they should all have some sort of prefix to show that they're part of Minstrel Buff, so maybe just MB:. Haven't done that yet. But that's a thought I have, is that might make it a little bit more obvious that all three of them are Minstrel Buff related. That being said, you do also have to come into the options and enable them. So we're going to scroll on down here, show melodic interlude window. We could even activate the other ones. Well, why not? There we go. So what we were working with last time was the melodic interlude window. And this window pops up whenever you have the melodic interlude buff, or I should say effect, and it allows you to see how long you have that effect for, by default 10 seconds, and which 2 healing is now unlocked for a friendly target. Because the important thing is, in Dissonant Stance, a minstrel can only heal themselves. All of their healing skills get rebranded, which is something I love. Instead of Chord of Salvation, it's Chord of My Salvation. Instead of Raise the Spirit, it's Raise My Spirit. And instead of Bolster Courage, it's Bolster My Courage. It's great. And any of your fellowship-wide heals, now you just can't do that anymore. It's all about me, 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 which is great. But Melodic Interlude does relax that restriction. So last time, we figured out how to get these effects, or I should say these skills on here, so that they are clickable, that you can hover over them and see the effect, and so that you can't accidentally overwrite them by dragging something else onto there and dropping it. So, with all that said, let's go ahead and also pull up the Hunter Deadly Decoy plugin. Now, this is one I made just on this stream, I think. And early on in Treebeard's life, we were finding that the exploding decoy that hunters have very effective because its damage seemed to be doing way more damage than we were. But what we didn't know is, when was this thing going to blow up? It's a fixed time, but we'd lose track of it. Little Redhead says, when you're in distance stance, you're no longer a mini, you're a meanie. Yes, I like it. Oh man, that would be so excellent if they had gone in there. I mean, it probably only work in English, but if if it was a Hobbit minstrel, should probably submit that as a bug report. So the deadly decoy window, it's a 15-second timer. Then it blows up, and you can also tell how much health it has because the health is a fixed amount based on the level of the hunter when it's summoned. Awesome. But I wasn't sure how big to make this thing. And I played around then with the idea of, well, what if we just let the user decide how big it is? All the way from ridiculously tiny to ridiculously huge. And so what I was thinking is we would do something similar. Maybe not so ridiculous, but something very similar for this melodic interlude window where it'll start out by default, but if someone wants to make it bigger, to make it more obvious, hey, you've got a thing, click here, then yeah, they can do that. So what I want to do is lift this scroll bar. Maybe not let it go up to times 10, but maybe start with 1 and go up to times 3. I don't know, we'll figure that out. So I want to duplicate this scroll bar in the settings of minstrel buff. And I want to duplicate the technique, which is to use the stretch mode of a control. And I think we can apply it to the window as a whole and stretch the whole thing. But that's a sort of a question for what happens. All right, so that's where we're at. I'm going to go ahead and bring up that code window. And actually, first thing I should do is check our source control. What has changed since the last commit or the last snapshot? So we're going to come on in here. We have some to-do changes. Awesome. But more specifically, what do we have? Melodic interlude window. Oh, we were playing around with the sizes of those icons, right? I remember this. Okay. So I think we're not quite done with that. So this will actually be part of that. Exos in chat says, window stretching is my cheat to crop stretched images. Yeah, I feel like there's more subtle things I could be doing with stretch mode, and so I keep trying to come back to it to refresh my memory, to get it more in my head. Like, this is a thing, and I've only ever used like stretch mode 0 and 1, and there are other modes out there. So this is just, has the secondary effect of maybe I'll remember this and integrate it more into my thought process of what possibilities are there. Okay, so in melodic interlude window, which is where we're going to be working, we have some ideas on how to change things up. Awesome. But this was all based on the idea of the icons themselves getting bigger. If we end up just stretching the whole window, then some of this work is kind of unnecessary. So that's an interesting point. You know what? I think it'll be easiest if we just go ahead and do what's called stashing. We're going to go ahead and stash the changes to this file, and we're going to call that possible icon size changing code. Because I don't necessarily want to throw that away. That was in the middle of something there, but I don't want to be dealing with it right now. So we're just going to stash that away. That's like putting it on a shelf somewhere. And in fact, if you're looking at the visual of this, we can see that pretends like it's a sort of a commit. It's just sitting there waiting for us to come back to it. We can see the changes that we were in the middle of, but it's not in the way of us making progress right now. So if you're not used to source control like Git or source control like Mercurial, then that's definitely a feature of some of these programs that wrap around. This is Fork, but Mercurial, no. Tortoise. Tortoise is another one. That lots of GUIs that wrap around source control, and being able to shelve work and just say, I'm not ready to throw this away, but I don't want to deal with it right now, is really neat. Ixie says, I made a minstrel recently and installed minstrel buff today, and now I understand what's going on. Thank you. You're welcome. I will say that minstrel buff comes in 2 parts. Let's go ahead and pull this on over. So in LOTRO interface, well, I don't want to go to the wiki, I want to go to the LOTRO interface. If you do search for minstrel buff, by default, you're going to find the original plugin by Melida, but I do encourage the out of combat timer patch. Excellent. You have both parts. Sweet. So for anyone else watching, the minstrel buffs with out of combat timer, that's where all of my stuff goes. And at sometime in the near future, I will hopefully release a patch with all of these cool extra things we've been playing around with. But the main thing for me was getting a when are the ballads probably going to expire bar at the bottom. Awesome. Okay. And yes, we have the Soliloquy of Spirit tracker, and recently, I think this is unreleased, but we now have the war buff tracker. So for instance, if you're not familiar with this, in Dissonance Stance, whenever you do a ballad, you get War Speech, which gives you plus 5% tactical damage. So it's in your benefit to have 3 of these War Speeches going at once. So that's what these little red bars here are, just a visual reminder of how many you have and how long each one has left. The way the timing works for War Speech is it really seems to encourage you to ballad, not ballad, ballad, not ballad, ballad, not ballad. Just keep bouncing back and forth between your minor ballad and something else, minor ballad, something else. And that's useful because it keeps those War Speeches up at the pace that they're expiring. And also, each time you do a minor ballad, you're going to get -1 on your cry and call cooldowns. Not to mention it does damage by itself. But yeah, so re-upping that plus 5% damage that you get from War Speech for only 8 seconds, it goes away really fast. But if you have 3 of them up, you're doing plus 15% damage on top of the 3% tactical damage to all ballads, codas, and cries that minor ballad itself gives you. So it's definitely, if you have a longer lasting combat, get those ballads up, get that War Speech and something else going on, bounce back and forth. Now, as a low level minstrel, you don't have that many things that aren't a minor ballad. So this is really more like once you're growing into your minstrel, levels 30, 40, 50, once you're starting to get some of these extra calls and cries, like Cry of the Valar, like Cry of the Wizard. Is there another one in here? No, that's an anthem. Like those two especially. Chromite says, you want to do minor ballad and try to cut its animation with piercing cry, then repeat. If your ballad didn't reset, you do some other cry, but at lower levels, it's probably not as possible without sharing a story. That is definitely more strategery than I generally play my minstrel at, so thanks for chiming in there, Chromite. I will say, yeah, even without cutting animation, the timing for War Speech definitely supports ballad, not, and you can just keep doing that. And if you time it reasonably well, you usually have something that you can do that is not a ballad during those off times. Although your longer cooldowns are like 30 seconds, and so without something like the trait that gives you a 50% chance to reset cry and call cooldowns when you use your coda, that can be very helpful. Anyway, we're off track, we're off topic, but it's great. Dan says, good to know when I do create a minstrel eventually. One of us, come. So, yeah, I mean, level 1 minstreling is having fun, but slightly above that is, yeah, when you're in combat, think about having your 3 ballads going, and then whatever anthems you have available. So Red Line Minstrel will definitely have Anthem of the Third Age Dissonance, and, what is it? Eventually you can get Anthem of War, which is neat, but you can also spend 2 trait points for Anthem of Composure. So depending on how much you play defensively or play with other people, Anthem of Composure can be a good thing to throw in there. You get resistance and tactical mitigation, and that's always nice to have, even if you are primarily doing damage. So these are the 3 anthems that I expect a Red Line Minstrel will have. Anthem of War, always good, everyone does more damage. Anthem of Composure, everyone takes less damage. And Anthem Third Age, which is just mostly affects the minstrel themselves, I believe. I guess technically it adds 10% to your call damage also affects everyone else, but most people don't have call damage, I think. Cool, okay. So, minstrel buff is great. Cool, thanks for chiming in there. All right, so we have shelved our work in progress. I'm just going to go ahead and commit these little to-do notes, to-do changes, so we don't have those lingering around. Awesome. And then, of course, we have the show debug options equals true. That's just for development purposes. We would not ship with that. We would just shelve it or just fail to include it. But we're good to go. Okay. So we can kind of borrow code from the Hunter Deadly Decoy plugin. Now, we could do that by opening up another Visual Studio Code. I want to be kind to my computer. It's doing a lot right now. So instead, I'm just going to pull over a Sublime Text window. Okay, so dtracker, nope, but cube plugins. We're going to come into Hunter Deadly Decoy. And so there's not a lot going on. Hunter Deadly Decoy was just an exercise in putting it all almost in one file. So let's open up the Hunter, well, let's open up main and see what we have here. So if I search for options, we have the draw options control. Great. Lord of the Rings Online does not require this, but you are allowed to, as a plugin, assign to a special variable that's available during plugin loading, plugins.get options panel. And if this is a function, then Lord of the Rings LOTRO will call that function and use the result, if it's a control, and host it in this window. And so that's exactly what we do. We have a plugin.get options panel equals a function, and all that function is doing is just returning this control that we're putting everything into. So very, very straightforward there. But now that get options panel is a function, LOTRO is going to try to put the result, the return value of that, into the options panel here. And within that, we control everything. We control the size of it, the color of it, what's going on in there. And so we can see the lock, the window in place checkbox here. We also have a scaling scroll bar. Excellent. Okay, so it looks like we are doing something based on the width of the window. Interesting. Let's go take a look at what we're talking about here. Okay, so scaling scroll bar, we've got a label, and we are updating that label to be equated to this value here. Okay. What else do we have? We have a scroll bar itself. I'm going to remember what I'm doing here. And so this is a sort of a question of how do you save data in your settings file? Are you saving it as an absolute value? The window is 5 pixels wide, 100 pixels wide. Or are you saving a percentage? For instance, it looks like our goal was to save how wide is this window as a percentage of the display of the screen. That way, if you were to load up the game and instead of 1920 by 1080, you were doing it in 1280 by 760, whatever that, 768, whatever that resolution is, you would visually, this box would consume the same proportion of the screen, is I think how we went with it. So let's take a look. Current value, scroll bar get value, scale value, we're dividing by 10, and okay, so we set the minimum between 5 and 100, and what that was this is actually, the bar thinks it's going between 5 and 100, but we internally think that's 0.5 to 10. Okay, I'm seeing that here. And so we get the value from the scroll bar, we divide it by 10, and that's our percentage. Cool. And then, so we're setting the scroll bar label. Excellent. We're going to want to hoist that up as well because we want our scroll bar, we want to know where we are on the scroll bar. And then screen width equal, we can get the width of the screen from the API. And then the width of the window would normally be, say, 32 times that. Oh, we're saving it, yes, as a proportion of the screen width. So, yes, absolutely. So if it's 1% of the total screen width and then you change resolutions, we're still going to make it 1% of the total width. So what number is displayed here? Let's say we just set it at 6. If we change screen resolutions, we should expect that number to be different, but the box will end up about the same. Okay, I'm remembering this now. Sure, that's a choice we can make for how to do this. I think I don't see a reason to change that, but I will want to make sure that we have done the localization work necessary to save a decimal number in our save file. And there are some gotchas there that we've talked about before. Okay, so what do we want? We want I'm trying to think of, because this, instead of responding with control backslash, I did the other choice of not doing that. So when you unlock the window, you can click and drag it around, and when it's locked, it might not be visible, and if it is visible, you can't click and drag it. So that was a choice that was made. But the melodic interlude window is different. So I'm going to think about that for a moment. Okay. Let's start by lifting some of this code into our options. Now, our options are more properly broken out into multiple files here in the option window.lua. Cool. Option window.lua, place controls is getting called. We have let's see, where's place controls getting called from? Find references. Excellent. So we have a constructor for the options window. Interesting. Why are we doing this? Get options control. What on earth is going on here? Where is get options control being called? Self get option control. Okay. Oh, I see. So I think the goal was to have the ability to have this be a standalone window or be hosted in the plugin manager. All right, that's fair. I'm not sure how you would ever get that. If I do /mb, we do get /mb. How about /mb options? No. Okay. So it looks like this was originally set up such that you could have its own window pop up. And I think it just never does that. Well, fair enough. There weren't originally enough options to kind of justify its own window. Just pulling up the options panel here. Or alternatively, this plugin is so old, it predates the options ability within the plugin manager. Some plugins have such a long history that you can see in their development workarounds to a more primitive plugin ecosystem. So, well, regardless, we have get option control. Excellent. And that's going to be place controls. We're going to call that. Awesome. So in place controls, that's where we're talking about. So down, as we scroll down, melodic interlude, right below here is where we're going to want to do our stuff. So where's melodic interlude? Excellent. Size of melodic interlude window. Now, we're going to need space for the slider. And I'll come on over here. We're going to need a space for the label and the slider. So how much space did we use before? That's an excellent question. And this is a technique that I absolutely adore when I'm doing plugins for Lord of the Rings Online, is if I need to do something, find another plugin that does something similar and borrow. seeing that it's possible makes all the difference. Even if you don't like copy paste the code, just knowing that another plugin out there has made this thing work. Super helpful. And in this case, it was me. Okay, so checkbox. We know we're setting the position, setting the size. We know this thing is about X high. Okay. That silver bar next to my level is drawing your eyes. Oh, you mean this little bar right here? How I'm so close to being leveled? Oh, you know it's gonna be even better. Here, how about we just activate a perks? Bloop. There we go. Now it's not an empty sliver. Oh, for those who don't know, on your radar is a toggle wallet button. And in your wallet is the perks button. Now, there might actually be a shortcut to it somewhere else. I'm not sure. But it is definitely here. I don't see it anywhere else. On the perks window, one of the biggest things you can do is you can spend 250 of your destiny, which is just a passive currency you earn when you're leveling, to get about a third of a quarter bar of blue bonus experience. Which helps you level up faster. So if you are struggling to level up as fast as you would like to, you can use up to 5 or one of these per day, but over the course of 5 days, they'll kind of stack up on each other so that if it's been a while, you can just use all 5 in one go. But then it's sort of a 24-hour recharge for enhanced XP. Yeah, you can do other things. You can run faster or have some temporary morale or get some hope, all sorts of fun stuff. +1 hope. Really? That seems underwhelming. Dwellin says, hey, new to the stream, are you a dev? Not in the sense of working for Standing Stone Games, but yes in the sense of I am a plugin developer. So, while I'm happy to talk about plugins and about plugin development and about coding within the context of Lord of the Rings Online, I have little to no information about the inner workings for Standing Stone Games or what's going on behind the scenes for Lord of the Rings Online. No more so than anyone else. Of course, I'll occasionally keep up to date on forum posts by the developers and so on. Now, if you are someone who likes keeping an eye on what the developers are doing, if you go to the forums, there is a special dev tracker button which will show you just the posts by Standing Stone Games employees. It's right here at the top, what's new, forum, and dev tracker. Click that and you'll get a filtered list of posts that were made by Standing Stone Games employees. Now, sometimes it's very nitty-gritty stuff. Orion is deep in the weeds, I think, on PVMP redesign stuff, this Welcome Back to the Edinmore's discussion. So if you care about that kind of thing, this is a great way to keep abreast of what the people who actually are working at the company are doing and sharing on the forums. So that being said, here we're just talking about plugin development, plugins in general, really, if there are any questions about that. And so, on that note, I believe Orion had a recent stream on the LOTRO Twitch channel. You should be able to catch that on the previous ones. Had a black background and was sitting in a chair and just fielding questions from the community about PVMP. So if that's of interest, I don't know if they'll be back, but Orion is a developer and was recently streaming. All right, so we're going to go ahead and lift out the code for the label. So first of all, where else is this label used? Just in the callback. Oh, wait. Update, scale, and label bar from screen size. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, am I going to want to do all of this or just... it's the eternal question. Do you scale things to the resolution or you just keep it simple and just say, you asked for 2 times, it's 2 times, we're done? And it's so much nicer to do it to scale to the UI size. I'll think about that. Okay. I'll keep thinking about that. Okay. So we want a label for the scaling scroll bar. Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and in our UI for minstrel buff, we're going to go ahead and pop that in right above this debug area. And remember that normal users don't see the debug area. That's just for us. The Redhead thinks Ryan might be back. I guess it depends on how nicely Ryan was received for the first stream and how interested people were in that. I think at the tail end of that stream, they were discussing possible plans for more streams. Okay, so we have a scaling scroll bar label. Now, we're going to want to be able to reference that later. So it's quite possible to want to save off a reference to this scroll bar by saving it as part of the self. Whoa, I just hit a fun keyboard shortcut. Wasn't the one I meant to do. All right, we'll just go ahead and paste in self dot here. So we're going to save off that name, that scroll bar label, so we can reference it later. Now, the set parent, we've got a different name here. Instead of options, it's parent, but we're going to go ahead and we parent that scroll bar label. We're going to set a size for it. I don't think that size is a bad size, but one of the easy ways to tell how you're laying UI elements out is go ahead and set a background color. Scaling, scroll bar later, set back, color, awesome. And remember, this is going to be a turbine.ui.color. And there are a bunch of predefined colors. I'm just going to choose one. What's a cool sounding one? Dark khaki. Yeah, why not? So we're going to go ahead. No, that's not going to look good at all. Okay, I was picturing that being much darker than it was. Lawn green? I mean, lawns, no, that's as bad as a lawn itself. I like greens in general, but ugh. Okay, old lace. Where did these come from? Papaya whip. Purple. We'll just do purple. It's fine. Okay, so setting the background lets you distinctly see kind of the bounds of the UI element against an otherwise unbackgrounded set of elements. Okay, setting text. We want to go ahead and put a pin in this for a minute. We're probably going to do something similar, but self-scaling, scroll bar, set text. We'll just call it label. That way we can see it in action. And setting the position. This is, again, where we want to go ahead and set the position. 10 over is fine, but we're using a y variable in this function to say how far down the page are we. So just use y, and then we'll increment y once we're done using it. In fact, y equals y plus 30, for instance. And that makes set position a little bit easier. In fact, all of these are 10 over just to provide a little margin. Probably would have been a better idea just to have a variable called margin, left margin. Make it a little bit more obvious what's going on here. But it's fine. It's fine. I'm gonna stay on target. Okay, so we have also this show debug options section. We're not worried about that right now. And then the other thing is the height of the window itself that we're working with. We kind of pre-calculate that. That set size of the window. Where are we? Get option control. So height equals whatever. We know we're going to add more stuff here. So let's just go ahead and preemptively make it about 60 pixels taller. Make life easier on ourselves. Okay. So remember that if you make changes in your code, Lord of the Rings Online is not going to see that. You have to unload your plugin and then reload your plugin to go ahead and see those changes. And it looks like no syntax errors. Awesome. Now let's come on into our options window. Cool. And we can see our label. Now, one of the things we see here is it looks like everything else is indented farther. That 10 pixels must be from the other plugin. So what are we actually seeing here? Make option checkbox. Let's pop on in here. Looks like position is more like 20 pixels. Great. All right. So let's go ahead and make ours 20 pixels as well. And again, a variable would have prevented us from having this problem. We could just use the variable instead of guessing. Oh well. Okay, so now we can see we've got the left alignment going on here. Awesome. Now, a neat thing to notice is that our text is aligned all the way left and all the way up. And you don't notice that if the background was just black. Just keep that in your mind. We have the option to align that text upper left, upper middle, upper right, left, middle, right, lower left, lower middle, lower right. And so, keep that in mind when you're laying out your UIs. We have some flexibility with the text. All right, so our label is going to be, we're going to put off what that means. And we do see those debug options are really close. So let me go ahead and just say y equals y plus 20, and that's a space the debug options add more. Awesome. I'm going to see that come into play here. If we unload and reload, pop back in, we can see there's a lot more, well, I would call it white space, but there's a lot more space between the label and the following debug options. Great. Now, an important thing is that label is actually about, I don't know, twice as tall as it needs to be. It looks like a height of 12 to 15 pixels would actually be tall enough for the text there. And we can see there's plenty of white or vertical space being used in this UI, so I'm not worried about it. But if we wanted to make that label shorter, less tall, we could totally do that. All right, so we have a label. Let's pop on back to the Hunter Deadly Decoy. We also want a scroll bar. And I guess the other question is, where is this scroll bar used? All right, I would like scroll bar without the rest of it. Okay, so let's find all scroll bar colons. That'll find most relevant things here. Okay, same places. So we're going to want to lift this and then modify it for our use. All right, there we go. All right, so we've got the scroll bar to adjust, and we're going to go ahead and say melodic interlude window size. There we go. Okay, so we got the label for the scaling scroll. We'll go ahead and label this melodic interlude window scaling scroll bar. Cool. And then we've got the scroll bar itself. And again, we're going to want to reference this again. In the Hunter Deadly Decoy, we can see we're not using class. We're not using a class to wrap up all of this data and behavior. And so we ended up using global variables or local variables. With class, we have an intermediary. We can store it in the class itself with a self dot notation, and we'll keep doing that here. So let me come on down, self dot, and we're going to do that again, self dot. All right, we don't have a couple of things here. Oh, options, the name of the thing containing this, that's just going to be parent. Okay, we got some orientation, size, position. Position we're going to want to change. Again, we're indenting by 20. And the height is going to be a variable. And again, we can go ahead and say y equals y plus 10. The height of the thing, in fact, we'll say 15. The height of the scroll bar plus a margin on the bottom. Okay, so we have set position, set minimum, set maximum. So this is another question of to what scale do we want to allow this window to be resized? I think 10 is going to be excessively comically large, but I'll keep it in there for right now because I think that'll be funny. 0.5 seems ridiculously small. At that point, why are you using it? But I want to support that because if you happen to be playing on a particularly large monitor, maybe that makes sense. Just most people aren't going to ever need it to be that small. Cool, all right. We have some comments here. Those were very helpful for understanding what was going on in the first place, so we're going to leave those. But what is this scaling scroll bar value? We can see the IntelliSense has underlined it because we're referring to a variable we haven't declared yet. That's very helpful. Undefined global. So let's go find out what that was in the other plugin. Oh, we just went ahead and declared that. Awesome. So that was just before the two of these. All right. So we don't have the right way of getting the settings yet. That's okay. But getting the width of the window and then scaling it in some fashion. These are all pretty reasonable things to do. We were scaling an icon, and so we're going to be complicating this a little bit by scaling the whole window. That's an interesting point. We're scaling the whole window. Icons are kind of definitionally the size of what they are, so it's very easy to just incorporate that information into the option window. But here we have the question, how big is that other window by default? And I think the answer is, well, we should ask that other window, and it can tell us. So I think that that's a question. What's the base size of that window? Because we need that in place of this 32. Or do we? I mean, we don't really. We could use 32 as an artificial size and say, okay, we're recording things as if the window were 32 large. What percentage are we going up or down based on that? I don't think that's what we want to do. But I'm going back and forth on this. Most people aren't changing screen resolutions all that often, but I do occasionally. So how much do I want to support my changing screen resolutions? Oh, sure. Okay, so we need a couple of things. Let's just spell out what we need. How is MB storing settings? The second thing is, how wide does the melodic interlude window start? Okay. And then the scroll bar value itself, we're multiplying by 10. I think there's too much going on in this line, in fact. So, local melodic interlude size melodic interlude window proportional width equals. It's a terrible name, but it's gonna help me understand this. Maybe we'll kind of drill that down in a bit. Local melodic interlude window default width equals, and then again we're gonna start with 32, but we know this is wrong. Wrong. And let me comment this. So wrong get from window. So that's a thing that we need. And then we can go ahead and start doing some math, which is to say local, we want to multiply the screen width. Oh yeah, this screen width equals turbine.ui.display get width. Awesome. And then finally, we can start doing some stuff. So I should probably spell proportional correctly. That'd be nice. Then we can do something with local equals proportional width times, I'm not sure what we're going to call that yet, proportional width times screen width Wait a second, why are we dividing by 32? This is why I need to spell it out. Divided by melodic proportional width times screen width. Or dividing by the side to get the scaling factor, right? So we want to get this in terms of 1x, 2x, 3x. How many times the normal size of the window are we? Okay, so Melodic interlude, the proportional width times the screen width is the melodic interlude is getting kind of long here. Maybe I should just call it MI. All right, MI, melodic interlude, MI. So this proportional width times that is the MI window actual width. And then we divide out to get the scaling. Local MI window scaled width equals MI window actual width divided by, and again, we have MI window default width, which is currently 32, which is wrong. That's okay. So that's what's going on here. And I mean, it's fine, it works. It's what you need to do if you want to have this window look the same proportional size when the screen is changing resolutions. But it's a bit of a twist. Okay, so we have a thing, and this is going to be like 2.6%. Example. Default window width. Okay. Example 200. In fact, we have a default width here. Don't we? Set size 100. Cool. 100, really? Maybe. E.g. 100. Okay, screen width, e.g. 1920. So the actual width, proportional width times the screen width. Example 2.6% times 1920 equals, I don't know. Great. 49.9. We're going to call that 50. We're going to call that approximately 50. 49.92 though. So equals approximately 50. All right, and then we're going to say the actual width divided by, so 49.92 divided by the thing. So 100 equals awesome 50%. So this is a 50% scaled example that we've got going here. Okay, that makes some sort of sense. And then scroll bar is using integer values between 5 and 100 to represent 0.5 to 10. So multiply here. So we have a local, oh, and here's where we finally have our local scaling scroll bar equals my window scaled with times 10. Okay. So that's the thing that we want to use for our scroll bar. This is obviously a lot more step-by-step detailed than this one line of code here, but I'm hoping the next time I look at this code, I will say, oh, yeah, all these comments are really helpful. So we still have two problems here. We don't know how to store settings. Well, we know, we haven't looked it up yet, and we need that default width. So first things first, let's go ahead and add a function here. Actually, I'm really curious. For minstrel buff start, is that 100 wide? Yeah, it looks plausibly 100 wide. It looks too wide is what it looks like. So let's come on back here. What's going on here? Oh, right, because I had changed that earlier. Okay, so we know for the width, in fact, we can start spelling this out in a function. Function, melodic interlude window, get starting, get default width. And this is going to local width equals, we need margin information. So we can see, again, we could use variables for this, but for right now, we can see there's a margin. In fact, we could do that here. Left margin equals 2. Local icon width equals 36. We can see the space between them. Position is getting, okay, 2 plus 36, that's 38. So we can see about 4 pixels between them. Does that look right? Yeah, that looks about right. So we can see local space between icons equals 4. Amaris in chat says, any advice for someone who wants to get into IT/coding? Going into school this fall, but still unsure what within IT I want to do. It's actually, yeah, it's an excellent question. IT can be a very broad umbrella, and it can cover things from the technical support side of hardware, where you're helping keep people's computers from catching on fire, to the more software-oriented stuff of you're writing code mostly for your day-to-day job, and so much in between. I would say that it is helpful to know whether you like coding, right? I mean, feels a little obvious to say, but if you haven't taken the time to write code to do anything, even if it's a little toy project, I'd really recommend taking the time, even if it's something simple like making a window appear on the screen in LOTRO. It doesn't have to be that. But make a window appear, make a box appear, make a button, make the button do something when you click it. If these things feel satisfying and engaging to you, that's a really good sign. And if you hate every moment of it, that's also a really good thing to find out now. Because there are plenty of jobs that will tangentially touch on the coding aspect. For instance, system administrators will often use scripts, PowerShell or Bash or whatever, to do things. And those scripts are very reminiscent of coding. But it fundamentally, to me, feels different. It's accomplishing a different job. And so system administrators, I wouldn't really call coders, but code is one of those things where, it's good to know what it looks like and how to write these scripts up, but you're not really coding in the same way, but you're still providing a valuable service. So I don't know if that's at all helpful. Let me know what if any of that resonates. But that's what I think of off the top of my head is, if you haven't done any coding, just give a little bit a shot. In fact, I've got a link over on Little Redhead's site, lifebeyondtheshire.com. I posted up some basic coding stuff. So Plugin Along, episode 1, basic user interfaces. Basic plugin coding. And so what we cover here is where you can find out more about Lua, where you can find out what the basic language looks like, and what errors look like, and more importantly, how to get something on the screen. How to get this window to show up. Just this code, and you can just copy paste it. You don't even have to write it yourself. Make it a little bit wider. It might even not stretch to multiple lines there. You want a button on there. It just looks like this, right? You don't have to do anything more complicated than that. If you want to do something with the button, or if you want to label. So you have some very basic ideas here. So if you like Lord of the Rings Online and you want to try a little coding, you can just copy paste examples from here as a starting point to kind of get yourself off the ground, as it were. Anyway, yeah. Make sure to give it a try. Appreciate the descriptive answer. You're welcome. It's such a big question, right? Like, what am I going to do with my life? And for some people, there's one answer. Like, I've been doing programming or software engineering or related activities for a long time. And for other people, there's 10 different things they're going to do with my life. There's 50 different things. And a thing that can be very easy, especially if you're in the United States, is to fall into that mindset of, there is the one thing that I will do and I will do it forever, and if I stop doing that at any time, I am some sort of moral failure, which I think is ridiculous. So if it turns out you do something for a while and you enjoy it and eventually you don't do it, you should consider doing something else, right? Like, you shouldn't feel tied to it just because you did it for a while. I'm gonna get some more water. Here we go. Right. There was if you're familiar with Hank Green, who is a part of the Vlogbrothers, he was saying something in a presentation a while back about how he was offered a job to do something television related, which was like a dream of 10 years ago Hank, right? Like that was something he really wanted to do, was get into television and do a thing. But at this point in his life, when he was giving the talk, he was like, yeah, I really don't want to do that. It would involve lots of travel, lots of meetings. I'd be beholden to other people. I'm just sort of meh on the whole idea. But he felt this sense of obligation to that, former version of himself. But that former version of himself doesn't actually exist anymore, right? It's by definition, you are smarter than your past self. You know everything your past self knew, and more importantly, you actually exist. Your past self is just a mental construction at this point. So yeah, if your past self said go left, and now you're like, no, I want to go right, that's totally fine. Do not feel beholden to someone who does not exist. I'm sure Hank Green said it more eloquently than me, but I hope that makes some sort of sense. Exogenesis says, who cares what past me wants? I'm far too busy infuriating future me. Also a person who does not exist, but hopefully will someday. Anyway, yeah, like, it is so easy to fall in the trap of, well, once upon a time I wanted to do so-and-so, therefore I must always want to do that. And if I ever stop wanting to do that, I have failed myself. No, past you doesn't care. They're literally incapable of caring. Hopefully. No, if past me is capable of caring about what present me is doing, then my worldview is slightly off. And by slightly, I mean tremendously. All right, so we have our left margin, our icon with our space between icons. We can just say, we can even see local right margin, whoops. Gotta learn how to type again, equals left margin. Cool, so we have left margin plus icon width times 2 plus space between icons plus right margin. And we can return that width. Exo says, until you invent time travel. Yeah, I have a feeling that if time travel were ever invented, violating several laws of physics in the process, we would immediately after be followed by so many paradoxes that you'd just be like, oh, so that's what happens when a universe blows up because of paradoxes. Neat. No, I'm going to invent a time machine so I can go to the past to stop this thing. That's the main reason why I'm going to invent a time machine. Congratulations, classic paradox. Like, you or the universe or both are going to cease to exist. Probably, right? There was a plate behind me? Ah, there was a plate behind me. I think some form of dinner is happening. Okay, so we've made a function that kind of spells out why the window is as wide as it is, which is great. And we're going to go ahead and say get default width. And right now, we're going to go ahead and use that for the size of the window. And more importantly, now that we have that function, we can use it over here in the options window. Because I'm pretty sure we have a reference to that somewhere. Let's find out. In our main function, let's see, we have a melodic interlude. Let's see. Melodic interlude window. Excellent. So we do have that. So we have, in the main, we have that. So we know it looks like self.melodic interlude window, but it's not actually self, is it? And from that, we're going to do a get default width. Awesome. So options window, get default width, but in main, for that minster buff, we have MB main, and that is going to work. All right, so we have MB main dot melodic interlude window, unknown field, interesting. We'll have to look into that. Self dot melodic interlude. Yeah, that's a minstrel buff main. I feel pretty good about that. Let's try that. And so that's actually going to be replacing our default width here. And now it is not wrong. Okay. Like so, thanks. Time travel paradoxes would be a pretty solid explanation for some of these turbine API bugs. I'll tell you, software is funny like that. You can definitely have code, especially in the C world of heavy optimization. You can definitely have, from within the computer's point of view, an effect happening before the cause. Oh, I see that thing. Oh, that's the thing that caused it. Software is wild, and it gets even worse if you have hardware issues. Like a classic problem with overclocking CPUs is that the laws of physics, such as they are for a computer, just get even wonkier. And you have, oh, I set this value to 0, and now it is not 0 anymore. Thanks, overclocking. Or just hardware failures at that point. Okay, so now we need to do settings. I'm a little worried about this mbmain dot thing. Let's see if there's anyone else using it like this. There is not. All right, let's see where else it's being used. Self dot. That's a minstrel buff main. Minstrel buff main is MB main. I'm gonna think it's okay. Okay. So settings. How do settings work in this plugin? Every plugin tends to do their settings just slightly differently, and so it's very useful just to come back and say, oh, okay, we're doing a git setting of whatever, we have a set setting of whatever, and if we're doing an initial loading of settings, maybe we need to do some fixing up. Okay, so we can see the fix up number function here is calling euro normalize. Excellent. We'll want to go ahead and do that ourselves. So if the settings is null, what are we doing here? Self.settings table. We're going to call it melodic interlude width. I'm going to call it width, but I'm not happy with that. Okay. Oh, but it's not 1x. It's the scaling. Oh, right. I need that. How do we get the width of the screen? Okay. I think I need to figure out how wide this window is. Hang on a moment. Okay, so we need to come on in here to get width, melodic interlude window, get default width, and I just want to go ahead and spit that out. Turbine.ui, turbine.shell.writeLine, default width equals. Oh, you know what? This does not need to be a class function, does it? It does not. So in Lua, I don't know of a way to do a static function, which is to say a function that's associated with a class, but you don't need a member of that class to call it. I want to see real fast. Static class function. Okay. Static function can be created by declaring it on the class definition table. Let's see an example. So we have a class. Interesting. So does that mean if I declare if I don't do this, if I do dot, what does that look like? Could I do that? That's a question. Because we're using a class function that is being granted to us by Turbine, I believe. And so Exo says, not sure why you would. So my reasoning here is that, first of all, static functions are great, and I want to use them more. No, but more seriously, the size of the default size of this window, to know the default size of it, I wouldn't want to have to already have created one in order to interrogate it. And coming from like calling functions like this is fine if they don't have any side effects. But the other question is that knowing what the default value is for the settings, because we're not just working with an icon that's 32 pixels wide like we were with 100 deadly decoy. So knowing what the default size of this window is before I have any instances of the windows, because we're still loading the settings, which is almost certainly happening first, in order for these things to know where they should be and what. And so I want there to be a reasonable default value, which I can only get if I know the size of that window, and I could hard code it, but what if I add more things to that window? Then it's just broken off and I won't realize it. So the thing I'm trying to solve is what would be the size of a window if I had one, which I don't because it's before we've created one. So that's what I'm wondering. And so I'm going to try something, which is to say, just call melodic interlude get default width. Amoros is 26, got a degree with something they no longer want to do, so here's to something new. Absolutely. You appreciate the answer? You're very welcome. Excellent. This would be simple to time machine. Exactly. That's one of the things I really like about static functions is if you don't actually depend on a class state, if it's information about the class itself or a generic helper function, then breaking that dependency where you can use it before you have one in order to make one, that seems neat. So I'm going to try that out. And if it works, I'm going to hope it does, we're going to go ahead and in our settings, we're going to just say the default is that divided by, and again, we have the Turbine UI displayed get width. And so the default should be the default size of the window divided by the current size of the screen. Okay, I gotta say, I don't know what's gonna happen here. We're gonna go ahead and load. And we definitely have a coding error. All right, oh yes, because we don't have a settings. Awesome. So let's come on back to that. So melodic interlude window, when we construct it, we have a settings and we save it off to self.settings. So that's the first thing. Is we're gonna come on in here and we're going to, sorry, we should be in the options window. So do we have a settings here? We do. We have self.settings. Excellent. So we're going to come on in here, and instead of settings, we're self.settings. And we're going to go ahead and get setting. And that is going to be melodic interlude width. Great. All right, I'm going to spell out that we're obviously not saving this as a percent. We're saving it as a decimal number. For instance, 0.026, which is 2.6% for our purpose. Excellent. Cool. Let's go ahead and try to load that again. It did not work. 102, attempt to get MB main. Excellent. So that was a concern. But why don't we have this? We're doing option stuff. Does MB main not exist at this point? Let's go back to our main window and take a look. Sure seems like it should. But option window is declared here. We have an MB main at the bottom of main. We're using it in other places. Global MB main a nil value. Okay, so place controls is getting called before that exists, which is suboptimal. Why are we using it? Oh, we don't need it anymore. Right. So melodic interlude dot get default width. We were breaking that chain. Awesome. Attempt to perform arithmetic on something that is nil proportional width. Great. Right, we're calling get settings on something that option window 104. Yes, proportional width. Great. Let's go into settings now. Okay, so if settings table equals nil, awesome. Then we want to go ahead and do a self fix up number on this, because as a decimal number, it might not survive a journey to or from German or French. Okay. And then oh, you know, I don't like this is an all or nothing, right? We create the settings table if it's nil, but if there's already a settings table in there, we're not getting these default positions if they're nil. So let's sidetrack ourselves again. Function, setting, settings, set a default if missing. And for that, we're doing a key and a value. What would that look like? Of course, just looks like this. So self settings table, and instead of a hard-coded one, we're doing key. Instead of that is value. But we would want to say if self.setting table key equals nil. Then do this. Which is to say, if there's already something there, use it. And then we can go ahead and end that block early and change each one of these to do what we want it to do. And most of these look the same, so I'm just going to go ahead and pop this into a buffer here, and we want it to look like set default if missing, right? So we want it to be self set default if missing, and for that it's going to be this key, and otherwise we're done. Cool. So for those 6, that's super easy. I think it's also going to be easy here, but I was worried about the transform. So we want, again, self set default if missing. And that right there can be outdented by 1, make it more consistent. So if the settings table itself isn't there, create the settings table. Then for each element in the settings table, if it's not there, go ahead and populate it with our default value. And we can go ahead and do the same thing with this theme index, actually. So, because you can see how they kind of said, oh, but now the theme index isn't in there, so we need this one-off solution. Okay, well, if it's not there, if it's equal to nil, then set it equal to 1. Done. So we can consolidate that as well. Okay. Same thing actually down here, in fact. Same thing. We're going to go ahead and set default if missing for a couple more items, and that's effect windows only. We're going to go ahead and set that to false by default, and select the window used. We're going to go ahead and set that to false as well. And we can see how I fell into the same trap as the previous coder. I didn't bother to think of a generalized solution. I was just like, well, I guess this one needs a default value now. So it doesn't hurt to kind of revisit your choice and say, does that still make sense? So we've got a set default if missing for all of those. And now our width should not be nil. Let's go ahead and try to load that. Hey, it loaded. Awesome. Now we can see that this window got to be more correct in shape, but I'm not exactly happy with how those icons look. So I'm going to go ahead and use the snipping tool that's a part of Windows, and just draw a little rectangle around there. And that'll let us actually just go count the pixels. That's for me, that's the easiest thing to do sometimes is, I know how I've laid it out, that this should look symmetrical, and yet something about it doesn't. So I've just copy pasted these pixels into MS Paint, where I can just blow this up and say, hey, what's going on? Okay, so we've got we've got 5 pixels on the left. Fascinating, because that was supposed to be like 2, wasn't it? Regardless, we've got the 5. Then we've got this itself, which is 32. Oh, it did look weird when it wasn't 36, wasn't it? Okay. Then between them, we've got 8 pixels. And so on the left, we've got 5. On the right, we've only got 3. Okay, we just need the right margin to be 2 pixels bigger. Easy enough. So let's come on back into our melodic interlude window. And that function here, where we were calculating this, the right margin just is going to be left margin plus 2. That's the only change we need to make. Because we parameterized the size of this window, when we start it up, we can see, hey, that looks way more symmetrical. Right now, the height looks just fine by itself, so I'm just going to leave that alone. Stop messing with it. Awesome. So we have a static function by which we can get the expected default width of the window. We can use that right now when we're making it. And in our settings, we can use that for the default scaling of the width. And in fact, if we unload this plugin and go take a look at the save file, let's see, where'd my Sublime text? There we go. Let's go take a look at that save file. So we're going to go into Q plugins. Oh no, we're going to go into Lord of the Rings Online. And that's going to be plugin data. That's going to be Minstrel Buff. And we can see the melodic interlude width is apparently just over 4% of the screen, which is to say, if I were to take that value into a calculator and multiply by the 1920 that my screen is, we can see that that window is 80 pixels wide, give or take a very small rounding error. Nate asks, is that my wife? Yeah, she's walking around in the background. It's dinner time. She streamed just before me as Little Redhead, which you may have seen. Okay, so we can see that math makes sense. We had 2 or roughly 36 spaces with some margins on the side. We're seeing a value of 80. That checks out as a plausible value for us to have for our default width. So everything looks good there. Awesome. So our settings are good. We can get, and that means we can now save. Awesome. Okay, so we also have, let's see. So how are we storing settings? We answered that question. How wide does the window start? Awesome, we answered that question. So now we have the proportional width, how much of the screen are we supposed to be. We have the default width for scaling purposes. In fact, I almost feel like we need to move that down here. We have the screen width, and so the actual width of the window we can multiply out. We have the default width, and that means we can get the scaling factor. Nate asks, do I have a Twitch channel? I do, although it is very underutilized. Unfortunately, I'm so busy that this is like the only time I get a chance to go ahead and stream something. You're welcome to give me a follow over there. I don't know if it tells you then that I'm streaming over here, but if it does, awesome. I also will use Little Redhead's Twitter to kind of remind people that we're streaming. So let's see, where is that? Excellent. Also, all of these streams go ahead and get uploaded to her YouTube. So there you go. You can find her Twitter at twitter.com/BeyondShire and her YouTube channel. You can just search for Life Beyond the Shire, but the specific link is right there. Okay, so we know the size that we're dealing with. Awesome. All of our questions there have been answered. Now we just need to go ahead and figure out how we're going to go ahead and present this information. Now I'm going to close this up, close that up. In the Hunter Deadly Decoy plugin, this is done using a language option so that we can support multiple languages. Now, what does that look like? Is there a strings file? There is. And scaling was, oh, good, we even have some translations. Hopefully they're correct. So what does the strings look like over here? We have strings English, awesome. So effects, we're gonna go ahead and melodic. In fact, if we name it the same thing, even better. So that was going to be melodic interlude width equals, and then we can just pull it from over here. Scaling. Now we might want to make that a little bit different. Actually spell out that's for the melodic interlude. Melodic interlude window scaling. That seems really long. When we're looking at the Hunter Deadly Decoy, we could see, well, we have a lot of room there with that scroll bar. All right, I'm game. Let's take a look at that. All right, I'm seeing an unknown error here. What's going on? Let me try loading that again. Okay, I just hadn't saved the file. All right, so we do want to go ahead and add that to the other two files. In this case, the German and the French. And since we do have some German and French, hopefully it's correct. My apology if it isn't. Then we can come on in. And go ahead and pull that in. Mastab, okay. So we'll at least have something in there. Now we can go ahead and use this. So in our options, we can just remind ourselves this is done with lang.options with whatever. And we can do the same thing here. So let me scroll on down. Wait, where was I? Oh no, I've lost it. Melodic. Oh, I'm in the debug section, of course. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and instead of just setting ourselves to label, we're going to be lang options, and this, we already know what the option name is. Melodic interlude width. Great. and we're not using that getString function. But we are using the string.format, which will allow us to go ahead and substitute in that number in the middle of the string. But let's see. We are doing a division by 10 to undo this multiplication, so we don't actually need to do that. We can just use the window scaled width. Awesome. Okay, we still have the back color. I don't think we need that anymore. And at this point, we have a scroll bar that is probably wrong. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, melodic interlude window scaling. I feel like if we made that a bit bigger, it might even fit. All right, we can see dragging this is creating all sorts of errors, runtime errors. But in the meantime, let's bump that up a little bit more so it all fits on one. Great. Okay, so let's look at the scroll bar proper now that we've got the label sorted out. Scroll bar, we can see we updated the parent there. Awesome. We've got the horizontal. It looks like all of that looks good. Okay, so covert. Looks like I had a typo. Let's go ahead and fix that. Covert, convert. Those have different meanings. Okay, so convert setting. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and update this. Convert this setting to a multiplier. But we've already done that. So we're going to go ahead and make use of the bar value. Awesome. And then value changed. Here's what we need. The current value, we do need to call that self dot anytime we see it. Self dot, self dot. Awesome. Okay. The current value equals that. Scaled value dividing by 10. Awesome. And we're going to be setting the text. Again, we're actually going to be setting the text in the same way here as we did before. So we're going to be calling laying options melodic interlude width. Awesome. Instead of get string here. Okay. Screen width, we're getting that current screen width, and we're going to go ahead and set a setting. But self.settings, set setting. And then what does that look like? I'll have to go look. Set setting is a name and a value. Great. Well, we know it's melodic interlude width. And it is something. Oops, I have accidentally hit a page up or page down. So we wanted to undo the scaling that we were doing before. So let's take a look at that. The scaling we did before is spelled out up here, and we want to work our way backwards. So let's take a look at that. Cats are awake. Excellent. Maybe they'll run around less at night. Okay, so we want to work backwards. We have the scroll bar value. We have the scaled value. So let's go ahead and just reuse some of these same names. Is that going to cause a problem? Redefining local. All right, that's going to cause a problem. Maybe. Okay, scaled value equals that. Excellent. All right, what are we going to do with that? We are going to divide out. It is going to look pretty similar, isn't it? Okay, excellent. So, local so we have the scaled value, which is the actual width minus the default width. So we can get the excellent. Let's see. If I move over here, looks like the cat is trying to get treats out of the torture device. Let's see what happens. Okay. Kind of work my way through this. Sometimes I'll just take a piece of paper and a pen and just write it out with numbers and whatnot. So, current value, example given, 32. So, scaled value equals 3.2. Percent. No, sorry, 3.2x. Excellent. Okay. So using that 3.2x, we were getting a scaled width based off of the actual width and the default width. And so we want to convert that around. So the actual width. Wait, what are we setting? We're setting the proportional width. And for that, we want the actual width. Do we? Doing this live is always an extra challenge. All right, what did we have? We had the actual, and in fact, we can replace that here. Icon actual width with the icon scaled width. Divided by the screen width. Sure. So the scaling, yeah, okay, great. I am unconfusing myself. So we have a scaling factor. So we need a local actual width equals the scaled width times the default width. Excellent. We know the default width is this. And then scaled width was just the thing times 10. Excellent. Okay, so the actual width is the scaled value times the default width. Great. I'm following myself, my own logic here. And then we just need to divide out by the size of the screen width. Great. Local proportional width equals actual width divided by the screen width. Now the screen width we know is turbine UI display. Cool. And then is that enough? The proportional width should be what we want. Let's find out. So what did we do before? We had the screen width. Excellent. In fact, we can keep that in play. So we had the scaled value, the default width, which is serving in place for the actual width, and then dividing by the screen, and that gets us the proportional. Oh, I feel so much better about that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and set settings to be that new proportional width. Now we had a redraw function, which was recalculate yourself based off this setting. We don't have one of those yet. We sure need one. So logic interlude window, that's our final step. We need a redraw. So let's go ahead and make that. Let's spell it correctly. Function melodic interlude window, redraw. And we're probably going to hoist some of the logic out of this constructor. But maybe not as much as I think, because we're just going to set the stretch mode, resize it, unset the stretch mode. Yeah, let's take a look at that. So that's actually going to be MB main, and then it's going to be the melodic interlude window, and we're going to redraw from there. And in the redraw function, just to make sure it's all hooked up correctly, turbine dot shell dot writeline redraw. Great. Okay, let's go ahead and unload. Let's see where we are. Did we make any horrific mistakes? Well, it loads. Excellent. So coming on in here, we have this bar. Oh, excellent. It is all hooked up. We're calling it redraw. Now, also important, we're getting a melodic interlude window scaling of 0 all the way up to 10, showing that line's not quite long enough. I thought it was good. So we're going to come back into option window and go ahead and bump that up to the full 300. Okay, and now even up to times 10, we can see that. And every time this bar is getting changed, we are calling redraw. Awesome. That's looking great. So, what are we going to do with that? Well, we're stealing liberally from the 100 of the decoy. Let's see what it did with this redraw function. Unable to find redraw. Okay, let's go into the 100 of the decoy window and find redraw. Wow, that's a lot of stuff going on in there. But why? Why is it doing that? Okay, so we have a display get size. We know the size of the window based off of the scaling factor. Sorry, based off the percentage of the width times the width. Okay. And we're doing a self-set width. We're doing some stuff with some other things, but here's the big one, is the set stretch mode 1 and the set size. Oh, I was setting the rest bigger manually. Interesting. That sounds like a hard way to do it. Let's not do that. So we're going to come on in here to our redraw function. And for redraw, we're going to go ahead and do a couple of things. First, we do want that calculation of how big are we supposed to be. So we want to go ahead and get local display width equals turbine display get width. Okay, and then we want local window width equals melodic interlude window get default width times self settings get setting, and again we're just using that same value, melodic interlude width. So melodic interlude width. Whoa, I have copied something more than I meant to. Melodic interlude width. We're just getting that value. So no, I'm sorry. We don't need the default at all because this is already the proportion of this display width. So display width times that melodic interlude width, which is again a percentage of the whole screen. So that's the window width. Now, what I don't have is a good way to deal with the height. Okay, then we can fix that. Local default width equals, and again, yeah, we're going to go ahead and call that melodic interlude window, get default width. And then we can say local window height equals, are we hard coding the height? I mean, it's entirely possible. Window height equals 50. That's a little depressing. Let's go ahead and fix that. All right, so we have a get default width, melodic interlude window, dot get default height equals function, and that's just going to return 50. We don't need to make it more complicated than that. We could calculate out why it's 50, but we didn't do that above, and we're doing fine. Okay, so window height is, I think, only getting used in the one place. So that is gone. And instead, we're going to use get default height. That line's getting a little long for my taste, so we're going to go ahead and break it up into each argument having its own line. And then we can see set size is equal to being passed default width and default height. Great. Now that's actually going to change because when we're loading, we're going to be wanting to pay attention to the size of things. Well, I guess the size isn't. The scaling comes later. Okay. So the window height, we have the default display width, default width, and window width. So local default height equals melodic interlude window get default height. And so the height is we want the ratio here of window width divided by default width times, we want that ratio of the width, and that's going to tell us how much the default height should change. So if the width shrank by 50%, the height should too. Simple, I hope. Let's find out. So then we're going to go ahead and just say self set stretch mode 1, self set size to window width and window height, and self set stretch mode 0. Just set it back to what it probably defaulted to. I think I want to do that. Actually, I might not want to do that. I might undo it. We'll leave it for right now. I'll have to look back into that. Okay. So we have a melodic interlude window. Yes! Oh, that was so excellent. All right, I'm going to bring this up here so it's a little bit more obvious. So we're at 1.3 right now. That goes all the way down to 0.5 and all the way up to 10, which, again, feels unnecessarily large. But I guess, is there any reason to not let someone do that? I think the answer is no. Like, knock yourself out, I guess. It's a little rough. But anyway, that's what those look like if you blow them up 10 times the normal size. Neat. Okay, well, let's bring that back down to something more reasonable, like, say, 3x. Exactly. Exo says, what if someone plays with a cinema screen? Then they're probably too good for my plugin, but, you know, why not? Yeah, sure. Someone could absolutely really want to. Because, again, this is 10 times that default size of 80 pixels, so 800 pixels. But if you've got a 4K screen, 800 pixels is suddenly not that big of a screen real estate investment. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mark that back down to 1 times. But we've got a very nice clear demonstration that everything's going great. Now, the one thing we saw was that if I go ahead and knock it up to 5x, why not, and unload and then reload, we can see that Options is treating it as 5x the size, but the plugin itself didn't pay attention to that. And that's where we want to go ahead and make use of this redraw function. And we can just do that at the end of the constructor. Self redraw. No need to write extra code. We've already got the code. So load it up, make it visible. Excellent. Now we can see we're 5 times normal. And if we just tick it over to 4.9, 4.8, we can see, yeah, it's shrinking for each one of those. Awesome. So that is basic scaling, right? Figuring out the math to convert a percentage of the screen into what multiple of the default size you are. Made more complicated because we're not just a 32 by 32 image anymore. Okay, that's excellent. I'm happy we made that progress. So what did we want to do? Use stretch mode to make it bigger than 36 by 36. Thank you, Exogenesis, for the idea. And we borrowed the slider from 100 of the Decoy to do it. Now, for me, I think 5x is not going to be how I do it, although this is only normally active for 10 seconds. It normally looks like this. It's active for 10 seconds until you actually do the heal. And as soon as the heal goes, that thing clears. So while I don't think I'm going to do 5x, I could actually see doing something more like 3x. Just, make it really noticeable, because I still, even with the normal default size, I still will be like, oh, hey, I could heal someone. And I feel like this would be a little bit more, oh, hey, I could heal someone. and get me more of that 10 seconds to actually do the thing. Okay, awesome. Well, here we are up in Mirkwood. We're going to go ahead and start winding down here, I think. I7 is not going to be streaming after me. I believe she is still sick. But I do have things that need being done. So as we approach the last few minutes of the stream, if you have any last minute thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, go ahead and start putting those into chat. And in the meantime, let's pull up our source control repository and see what we did today. So, allow user to specify melodic interlude size. The one thing I was worried about was, oh, hey, waffles. If only there were bagels. One thing I'm worried about is if someone doesn't have access to this debug option, you can change this scaling, but you don't really know how big it is until you activate it, by which it's a little too late. So I think a really nice quality of life refinement is if someone drags this bar, then the window becomes visible for a few seconds. After 5 seconds, it goes back to whatever its normal state is. So I think that'd be a neat refinement to add. So let me add that as a reminder. When scaling bar is changed, make window window visible for a few seconds. Okay, I think it's a nice quality of life thing that we can do later. All right, let's take a look at the melodic interlude window. We got rid of that window height. We made it into a function. Our set size is now much more parameterized. We have a redraw function, a default window height and width function. Those are all great changes. So we're going to go ahead and, the one thing I was curious about, let's go ahead and pull that back before I forget about it. In the melodic interlude redraw function, I'm used to the idea of setting the stretch mode back to the default value. Let me see if that works, or is that the wrong thing to do here? Well, that sure seems like the wrong thing to do since I can't even see it now. Okay. Now, setting stretch mode to 1 over and over doesn't seem very useful. If we pull that out and added it right before the redraw, does that make more sense? Yeah, that seems to make more sense. set it to stretch mode 1 once, and then adjust the actual size after that. Okay. So that was hoisting out the set stretch mode so that we're not calling it repeatedly, the value is not changing. Okay. We have changed the height of the option window here so that there's still room for everything. Excellent. We have added in stuff for the size of the window, the label, the scroll bar. Excellent. And also added some space before the debug area. Neat. In our settings, we went ahead and added a helper. This is actually a different thing, and I almost feel like that should be first. So let me pull out this comment here. We'll just save it off in this window here. All right, so in the options, in the settings, we pulled out the checking if a key is missing. And so we have pause to locate melodic interlude. Pause to locate melodic interlude. Awesome. The theme index, yes. That's going to be here. The effect window and the soliloquy window. Yes. So basically everything except the melodic interlude with stuff. And we can see just those changes here. Okay, so refactored. No, actually fixed missing setting code to account for missing values, not just missing table. That's a very long comment, but that's what we did. Was here it was an all or nothing, and then we had to do one-off fix-ups, and now we want it to just be make the table if it's missing, and then make any of these values if they're missing. If they're already there, they're already there. All right, so that's going to be our settings change. And then we can come on back to allowing the user to specify melodic interlude size. So that's going to be our commit message. And again, we're taking the melodic interlude window. In the options window, we're going to take everything except the debug options. Come back in here, unstage that. In our settings, we've just got the set default of missing and the fix up because we know it's a decimal number. And decimal numbers don't transition well between client language changes. We've got the text we're going to use in the UI. We've got a basic German, English, and French version. And there we go. That's all it took, all it took to get that in there. Very cool. My poor computer is struggling. Maybe because it's raining in game. Oh well. Okay, so here we are at the top of Markwood. We now have a melodic interlude window that whose size is adjustable, makes it a lot more visible. Now, one thing we're seeing is that the drag bar is not getting updated, and we could do that real fast. The size of that drag bar would be nice if it updated, wouldn't it? So drag bar. All right, we have a self.drag bar. We want to go ahead and call self.drag bar layout and see how that works. So when we are in the redraw function, let's go ahead and explicitly call self drag bar layout. All right, now when we move, oh, it's still not doing it. That is the default size. So I am curious, what's going on with drag bar layout? Target get size, yes. Well, one of the neat things about using a library like this is we can just go ahead and add some debug text. So turbine.shell.writeLine, and we're just going to go ahead and copy in drag bar layout and include the width. Great. And then before we called that, let's get the width of the window as we expect it to be. So this is melodic into the redraw. And we want that window width that we're using here. All right, we'll go ahead and reload. Super easy. We can see we got drag bar layout. Yeah, let's go ahead and update this. We're getting 142. So we're calling, in redraw, we're at 246, 254, 262, but inside we're not. So what is this attached to? That's the big question. Drag bar has a target. And what is self.target getting set to? Well, we have a set target function, which is getting called from what looks like a constructor. Yeah, that constructor, whatever we're passing to the constructor as the first parameter. Cool, okay. So we have a self drag bar. Let's find out what it's attached to. Maybe it's attached to the wrong thing. All right, so we are passing self. Excellent. Why don't you like that? I'm uncertain. And then a title. Received a maximum of 0, but got 2. That's weird. All right, we have a window, and we're setting a constructor, a target name, and passing itself there. Okay, interesting. So what is 82 wide, and why is it causing us problems? All right, let's actually call self get width because that's what we should be doing anyway. We're going to go ahead and unload, reload, and do some resizing. Okay, well, we can definitely see that now when we're calling the self get width, we are getting that old value back. This is probably... Exo says, why call drag bar at all? It feels like it'd be tighter to have drag bar listen to the size changed event. Absolutely true, and actually, as we saw, it was. I have a feeling size changed isn't getting fired because we're in a stretch mode of 1, is what I'm guessing. Because if we look at the drag bar already had, size change was already calling that. So if we do a shell.writeLine to self.size changed, I think we're not going to see it. So we're going to go ahead and unload all and reload. And we have the size changed to 82. Awesome. And then, oh, we're getting size changed, but we're getting the not scaled size. We're getting so the size is being falsely reported, it looks like, which is great. I think that we can then take advantage of that. Okay, so drag bar. But what do we do with that? If the size is being improperly reported, well, we can overload it. Okay, so dragbar is using the get size function. I believe layout is target get size. Excellent. So let's come on in here and go ahead and make our own version of that. So we need function, melodic interlude window, get size. And normally that would return turbine dot whatever this is. We just need the parent call here. There we go. We're not going to do a constructor, of course, but I believe the base call would look something like this. Night, Tane. Is it like this? Let's find out. Because otherwise we're going to get a infinite loop, invalid member function call. Oh, I know I've seen this before. Where did we get this? In the timer control. Timer control does something wonky with this. There we go. This is what we want. So that would be get size, yeah. Exo, that's a good point. Asking why dragbar does not listen. It might actually. Well, it's certainly listening for other things. Yeah, so this dragbar library is a library. And so that could certainly be a patch to that library to say, hey, maybe it should just listen. A lot of windows don't change size, and maybe you could see a case why you wouldn't want it to. But, oh, okay, cool. This is how I want it. We're passing this to elf, excellent, okay. Okay, and then we just want to save off the modified, the scaled window width and height. So we're going to go ahead and call that self.scaled, or maybe stretched would be more in line, stretched window width, and self.stretched a window height. Excellent. So as they resize things a lot. Yeah, well, I don't know if the developer of the dragbars library is still active, but you could definitely submit a patch if someone hasn't already. Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and set the size to that, and then get size, just for kicks, if self dot stretched window width does not equal nil, and self dot stretched window height does not equal nil, then return those two things, right? Return a tuple of those. Otherwise, if we don't have either of them, yeah, just go ahead and return the base. Well, why not? Now, changing this kind of low-level function feels a little iffy. And it's not my favorite way to do this, but it might work. So if we come in here, we can see the melodic interlude drag bar is now definitely the right size. And as we scale it on down, we can see, and scale it up, we can see it is responding to the size changed function. Okay, now we have a couple of turbine.shell.write lines in here. We're going to go ahead and take that out. It looks like the drag bar maybe still has that. This is an excellent use of source control. We're going to go ahead and kill that entry. All right. Melodic interlude. Okay, just here. So we have a get size function that overrides the default behavior and uses these stretched versions. And that is all. Report accurate size to work around stretch mode size reporting inconsistency. I don't know if I would call it a bug, but it definitely feels like an inconsistency. Hey, how big are you? I'm 80 pixels wide. Really? You look like you're 800 pixels wide. Yeah. Right. Oh, I think this in-game rain is definitely taking some processor time. Too bad I don't have the admin ability to just turn that off. Okay. Okay. So what do we have? We have, hopefully, gotten rid of all of our debug statements. Excellent. And we have a drag bar that anytime the size of the window changes, it's going to change size. Excellent. Just a matter of perspective. Absolutely. Like the stretch mode, the whole point of it is to be a stretch of a basic size, right? So getting that size, it feels like it would be useful to know what is the base size. And I mean, it's exactly what we did with these, right? The default width and the default height. It turns out we didn't need those. We could have just called get size. Well, if we had the thing constructed already. Because that's going to give you a consistent value even if you've stretched it. So I can see the use of it, that's great, but it's a bit of a gotcha if you don't know that's what's going to happen. So that's fun. And we have our redraw function, which is going to calculate, okay, the scaling factor, the current size of the window, what does this look like? Awesome. And it all looks great. So neat. But Exo, it is a great question. I'm guessing whoever came up with drag bar just felt like if you wanted the drag bar to pay attention to the changing of your widget, then you can add this little, it could be a one-liner, right? This could just be just like this, right? A one-liner. In fact, you don't even need those arguments. They're redundant. And suddenly you've got this, right? Just hook up size changed to call relayout and you're done. So I think that they probably figured like that was a thing. But yeah, if it were me, I would consider in some way being able to set a, pay attention to resize equals true, or maybe call a function. And then drag bar can go ahead and do this. Oh, I guess the real problem is some plugins just do single dispatch, right? You just overwrite the size change. And some plugins do multiple dispatch where you have the add and remove handler functions, which go ahead and, if this isn't there, go ahead and a single entry, or else, there's more than one, we're going to convert it to a table, and then, we can go ahead and remove them, right? There's an inconsistency with how event handlers are done. And I feel like, if we're talking about time machines, we should go back and go ahead and have those turbine classes, go ahead and have those handlers built in by default. And they might have been, they certainly are there now, but I don't think anyone uses them. So if we come into Documents, Lord of the Rings Online, plugins, come on into Turbine. Now, actually, you say it wouldn't override the function. You'd listen to the event. What event? which event would you listen to? The size changed, or what would that look like? Let me open up the documentation here. So we have a UI control event size changed. There's a size changed event getting fired. Yes, there is. It's this one. Yes? And in that case, in lieu of parlance, what you do is you assign a function to that, and only one target gets to listen to that event. So if your plugin wants to listen to size changed, there's no equivalent like there was in C# or some versions of C++ where you can just do like a plus equals here, and this delegate just accumulates listeners, right? There's no multiple dispatch that we're working with. So assuming we're talking about the same thing here. But Turbine does have that. It supports a table of functions. When you say it supports, what would that look like natively? Because yes, there are these functions here. And if this is what you're talking about, event.fire, event add and removed, yes, but not every plugin uses these. Some roll their own. You'd be using add callback, remove callback. That's my point, though, is those functions do exactly the same thing that here in Turbine does, which is to say, hey, we're going to pretend, we're all going to agree that anyone who wants to use this callback is using these functions, and that event handler, instead of just being a single thing, we're going to use the special fire function to deal with that. And maybe this is how those callbacks are being called under the covers. But for, I would need to do more testing to convince myself this is the case. But yeah, so I agree, multiple dispatch should be there by default. It is here in this file. I don't know for sure that this is how these events are done, but if it is, that is good to know. If you can just call event add, event remove like that, that'd be neat. Feel like, okay, yes. So we're calling event in some metatable. We're declaring a call to self to dispatch over to fire. Nice. I wish this came with sample code, but I believe it's doing the multiple dispatch that you're used to with add callback, remove callback. Cool. Okay. Anyhow, so that's the thought that comes to mind is, unless everyone agrees on how events are being done, maybe that's why they didn't roll it into their own. On the other hand, they could have just said, you have to do events this way, and people would have just done that. So yeah, submit a patch, hoist that up, see what happens. But this is how I'm used to seeing events done, where you just assign a function to the variable instead of using a helper function. And the helper function supports multiple dispatch, yes, but this is also legal, and you have to be able to support that. Cool. Okay. So, did I make any changes while I was doing all of that? I did not. Okay. Well, I think that is the end of what I wanted to talk about today. Thanks so much for giving me things to think about, Exo. Okay. It never rains in the 21st hall. Yeah. I'll have to think about that. Okay. Well, that is all we're going to go ahead and cover today. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of LOTRO plugins. i7 is not going to be next, but we'll hopefully be back next week. I do hope to see you here next week. And until then, keep plugging along. All right, bye-bye now.